My name is Michael Vita. Today is February 3rd, 2023. Well, I was living in Miami with my mother. My mother lived with me for about 6 years, the best time in my life. And after she passed away, I could go anywhere. And I decided that I don't remember how old I was, probably 77 or something like that. It was either San Diego, which I liked a lot, or Fort Lauderdale, which I knew because I used to come here. There was a lovely establishment on Wilton Drive that was a place where you could go for New Year's Day dinner or Thanksgiving dinner. And I had relatives who lived in St. Lucie, and this would be the meeting place. And I had friends who lived in Delray Beach, and there was a place called, it was on the corner, and it was a breakfast place. And every so often we would meet there, and it would be in the middle of Miami in Fort Lauderdale. So I decided to come here. And I believe that if there are no obstructions and obstacles when you decide to make a move, then that is what you're supposed to do. Because the first place I looked at apartments.com, and they gave me 3 places to look at for an apartment. The first place I looked at, I said, could you leave me in the apartment, in the model apartment, for 5 minutes? And I felt so comfortable that I signed the lease right at that moment. And I moved in 3 weeks, in December 14th. So that's how I'm here. And it is very comfortable for an older gay man to be living in Fort Lauderdale. I think it was always. When I was in school, I was more partial to the boys than the girls, although I did have the de rigueur girlfriend. And I could remember there was a young boy who came from North Carolina who would walk in the sidewalk, without any shoes. And I thought, how attractive is that? And although we didn't do anything, it was an attraction. Oh, I didn't know, no, not at all. But the church did. And the schoolmates in my grammar school did. And like anyone who was grown up in the 50s, I've been called names and spat on and whatever, everything. And also the Catholic Church. Now, if you want to talk about the Catholic Church, I think it's destroyed so many men's lives because it took a while to feel worthy and worthwhile. And so I'm not going to hell. Again, I believe that when there's no obstructions or objections, you just do it. And when I was graduating from high school, from grammar school, I was in the top third of my class, so I wasn't a dumb boy. And I applied to every high school in the area. And all of my classmates were getting accepted and I wasn't. And my father died when I was 13 and my mother had to go to work, which was unusual in the 50s. It was 53. And she happened to work for a theatrical agency called Samuel French, House of Plays. And because my father passed away so young, they used to like to go ballroom dancing. So she had no one to go ballroom dancing, and I was tall and I had rhythm, and so she taught me all those steps. And at weddings, we would dance around the hall, and I enjoyed it very much. So when it came time for graduation, and I still didn't have any high school to go to, except the public school, and at that time, public schools didn't have guns, but they had knives and chains and leather jackets and all that stuff. And I certainly didn't want to go there. And so people in her office said, why don't you take your son around the corner? That she was on 45th Street and 6th Avenue. Why don't you take your son to the High School of Performing Arts on 46th Street? And she said, okay. And so I auditioned, and I had a lady who used to be a rockette help me with the audition. It was to the Firebird, and I imitated a fire as much as I could. And within a week, I was in a high school, and I was registered in the dance department, and therein started it all. I was never in the closet with them, and there were many gay people in the professional schools. And I danced with Martha Graham, the Technique with David Wood, one of the soloists with her. And I danced with Mae O'Donnell, was the first lady to leave Martha's company. And I was having a ball. It just felt right. Yes. And it's funny because we're best of friends now. And she lives in North Carolina, and we email each other, and we see each other whenever we can. She was a schoolmate, and she married another schoolmate, Stephen, so they're husband and wife. And it's amazing because I believe that life depends on who you travel the time with. And when I see them, I can see the time that I'm living. I see the beginning of it and whatever the end is going to be. And so I cherish their friendship and her friendship. And I gave her a bracelet. And I said, would you be my girlfriend? This is the freshman year. And she went, and I thought, oh my goodness, I just made her just upset and all. I didn't realize she stuttered, which she doesn't now. She's quite glamorous now. She went into the music business. And so I enjoyed that for about the first year. And then I went in. When you go to a public professional high school, there are various places where you can go in the summer to their theatrical summer camps. Mordecai Bauman had one in Massachusetts. Green Mansions was another where lovely young ladies went on the weekends to find lovely young men to marry. And they had shows. They had opera excerpts, comedy shows, dance shows, reviews. And so they had people like Don something or other who had a television show, and they had Bobo Lewis and people like that. And that summer, I had a little affair with an opera singer, and there it was. No, because when I was in high school, I hung around with about 6 other dancers, men dancers, and we'd go from rehearsals to bars to wherever, and we were probably illegal because I was 16 and 17. I don't know what the age is. And My first experience wasn't very pleasant. It was a gentleman who wasn't very kind, and I got up and left. And so, yeah, so that was the first, or one of the first. And also, it's a learning process. You know, at 17, it's an adventure. Okay, I'll go back to my first lover, Danny, who loved me very much, and I loved him very much. And we were together for about 18 years. And I thought that being in the theater, you get people are attracted to you for whatever reason. But Danny was the person who was in my life to teach me what love is, what love was, what love can be. And so what my mother did was to show me how to love, because I used to watch her. She was 96 and very small, but very all there. We had a good time, but I would watch her sleep, and my heart would go out to her. I could actually feel the joy and the love go out to her, because she was completely dependent on me. And that's why I say I've been very fortunate, because I have been loved and I have loved. Not deep, not as deep as that, no. I've had other relationships that have been very comfortable and very nice, and I mean, I had a relationship with a young man called John in San Francisco, and he made me laugh all the time. And I love people who come into your life and just make you laugh at yourself. I know a person who I was very fond of was he wanted to be a matinee idol. His name was Oren. And he was very handsome and had been married and divorced, and now he was gay. And he made me laugh, and I loved him for it. But it wasn't a relationship. He was the first person I knew that had AIDS.
Ah.
And he would always be worried about his weight, because he was kind of a chunky man. And he wanted to be a matinee idol. And he became a matinee idol. He was very handsome with black hair, and a sense of humor, and a gorgeous voice. And he became a matinee idol in They're Playing Our Song. He was the replacement, one of the replacements. And
on Broadway or in San Francisco?
On Broadway. And I saw him across the street at a bus stop, and I said, "Oren, please don't get any thinner. You're so thin. Please don't get any thinner." He said, "Well, I'm taking coffee enemas." I said, "Well, please don't." Little did I know that he had AIDS. And when I found out he had AIDS, it took me 6 weeks to go see him. And I was frightened. And when I got up enough nerve, I called and asked his aide if I could go up and visit him, and please don't leave the apartment. And I went up and saw him, and he was in a wheelchair, and he was blind, and he made me laugh. We had been in industrial shows together and other things, and it was... I sat there and said, "He's making me laugh." And it was an amazing experience. And I held his hand. He held my hand. And he started to sweat, and I started to sweat. And I thought, oh my goodness, there's the virus going from his hand to my hand. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And when the aide came in and said he has to take a nap now, would you help me put him to bed? I held his head, which was heavy, and he was very thin. And I put him down, and I went into the kitchen and scrubbed my hands raw. And I said, thank you very much. And I signed the calendar to say I will come and read to him. I will come and talk with him. It was the first time that that kind of help was beginning. And I walked down to my apartment. He was on 86th Street and I was on 44th Street. And I stopped at a corner and I said, it just took me 6 weeks to see a friend. I will never do that again. I will never turn my back on an AIDS patient again. And that's what started my AIDS work. I quit the theater. I retired from the theater, moved to San Francisco, and worked for Shanti Project, which at that time was the third largest AIDS organization. I was assistant development director, and along with another gentleman called Don Johnson, not the actor, but another person who's passed on now from AIDS. He had a company called Sterling Productions, and he put on comedy shows and variety shows at the various theaters, the big hotels there. And I joined his company, and he was the businessman and I was the pizzazz man. So nothing you ever do is lost in your life, because we were able to raise a great deal of money, $250,000, and 1990, 91, 89, 90, 91, 92, in San Francisco. Because anyone who was coming to the Quran Theater or the whatever other theater they were coming, I would contact them, and I would say, would you shake a hand for $100? And they'd say, of course, Michael, of course. So I had a series called Shanti Premiere Series, which was the first preview, and whoever wanted to give $100, I would pay the ticket, which was probably $45, and the rest would go to Shanti Project, and they would come. And at that time, it was a huge community in San Francisco. If I asked you to help and you couldn't, you would ask me to ask someone else, and I'd say, Robert said that you may be able to help me. Oh yes, what do you need? And they would pour their talents in these evenings that we gave, annual dinners. And so it was a wonderful, productive time for me. Everyone, Tommy Toon, Robert Morse, Anne Ranking, the cast of the whole cast of a show that came there that I knew. And the limousine was, Bobby Morse came in this limousine and he sat in the back and said, what am I doing? Where am I going? And I said, well, you're too late now. You're gonna shake a hand and speak. And he said, okay. And so it was the time. And I always wore a tie a shirt and tie and a jacket, because it was a time when it went from a gay disease to a middle of the road disease. And nobody was touching anybody, nobody was kissing anybody. And so I would speak to boards of the banks or corporations, and they'd say to me, well, why am I going to give you money? And I said, not for me, but for your children and your grandchildren. Who knows what kind of world this is going to be? It was the time of AZT, it was the time of ACT UP. And so I feel very good about that time. Again, the right place at the right time, doing the right thing right now. Several things. It's never one thing. I had a wonderful relationship with a man called John, who made me laugh. And John, in my opinion, thought that he wanted to be an actor. And I think he thought that I was a bigger star on Broadway than I was. I was a second banana. I played featured parts. And he put all my posters up in the hall, and he said I was the best thing to ever happen to him, and we would cook vegetarian food, and we had a lovely time. Until he came, for my 50th birthday, I gave myself a gift of playing in a show that was playing in San Diego in a big theater. I had played in San Diego at the Starlight Theater, I think it is, in Balboa Park, with the lights. I don't know if you know that story. It was built before the airport, and the dome was in the flight path of the planes, so you couldn't hear when they came over. So the manager put yellow light, red light, green light along the apron of the stage. And when the stage manager saw the plane coming, the lights coming, he would put the orange light on, and we'd know that we're going to stop in a minute. And then he'd put the red light on when it came over. And I was in, I think Molly Brown. And, it's a big production number, and I had white gloves, and I was singing some kind of song, and all the cast was along the stage front, and I was going to tell them something. And we had to stop and freeze. And all I did was move my finger like that, and the audience roared. And I thought, what a connection. We're all one. One of the best things that's happened to me on the stage. It's happened many times. It happened in Woodstock when I was in Boys in the Band, and I was just in it. And the cast patted me on the back at Curtain Call. And I thought, I'm digressing. I was with a friend who was trying to write a book with an actress who was in movies in Broadway. And we would go up to the Red Barn where she lived, and she would cook dinner for us, and we would put the tape recorder on, and she would make drinks. And of course, as she drank more and more, and it didn't go anywhere. But she did say that it only happens a few times when you're taken out of yourself and into the realm. And I'm so happy that it's happened to me like 3 times.
Did you ever hear the Laurence Olivier story?
No.
He was playing Hamlet, and he believed that it was his best performance ever. And he walked off the stage, went to his dressing room, and started crying. And someone from the cast said, "Why are you crying? It was the most brilliant performance I've ever seen in my life." He said, "That's exactly why. I may never get it again."
Can you imagine the turmoil that Judy Garland go through? How can you top a performance that was raved about? I had the good fortune of being at her Carnegie Hall, and the place was buzzing. And as soon as she came out, she was in our hands. We were in her hands. And how do you stop that? How do you top that? Intermission came, and we were all crying from excitement. And those are what makes you do what you do, what I did for love. And I will say I'm so grateful to have experienced that, because I was an actor. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't playing and acting. I was an actor. Well, John came to see me. I got him tickets for a Saturday night show, and where people used to applaud my exit because I wanted to show him all, And he said, I want to go see another play in San Diego, so I want to go see you in a matinee. And of course, the matinee wasn't, you know. So he came to see the matinee, and I think that's when the bubble burst. I've never expressed this before. I think the bubble burst, so it changes. I wasn't who he thought I was. And he wanted to be an actor, and he wanted to move to New York. And I said, I can't move back, John. I just can't go back. And I said, you will never have what we have, because it was a lovely relationship. But please go, because I don't want anyone to tell me that I stopped someone's dream from happening. I have no idea what he's done, or what he is, if he's successful or not. Of course, his name was a name of a very famous actor who's dead, and you can't have the same name as anyone else. So he changed his name, and I don't know what he changed his name to. So I hope he's doing well. He was 12 years younger than I was. So he's probably hitting 60, the end of 60. Maybe 55-ish. But I wouldn't have changed that experience ever. San Francisco is a wonderful place to live, especially at that time. I hit 2 weeks after Harvey Milk was there. I was there when Gilbert started the flag. I was there when the quilt started. Things were happening then. And I got to know Senator Feinstein. I think I mentioned to you that Senator Feinstein presents Michael Feinstein, which was a lovely evening. And Michael wanted to eat after the show. And I said, what? Where nothing is open in San Francisco that I knew of. And he was a vegetarian. So I said, Michael, and he said, don't bother. And so he went his way, and we thanked him and raised some money. Well, I wanted to go to try to, my Danny, my love, moved to Galveston and became Mr. Mardi Gras. And he had a big house, and he was the person who designed clothes for the debutantes coming out. You know, they came out every year and did a bow.
Differently coming out.
Well, yes, a different coming out, yes, the society coming out. And he would make their fans and their masks and their headdresses and their dresses. And so I thought perhaps I could help him and also rekindle my relationship, but it just wasn't the same. So my friend Ed said, I'm in Miami Beach and you must come to Miami Beach. And so there were no obstacles and no objections, and I got in the car and drove to Miami Beach. And within 2 weeks I was working for City Hall. I was in the information office, city clerk. Hello? Oh, well, they would call and say, we're coming down and we don't know what to do. And I said, well, please get up and see the sunrise, because it's a miracle. And you're on the beach, on the east side of the Atlantic Ocean. It's too early. Well, then go back to bed after that. That's what you're here for. Little did I know they were there to play. Because that was the time when there was drugs in 94. And so I had a wonderful time in Miami Beach. Again, no obstacles, no objections. I worked for City Hall. I was the city liaison for special events. And I would make sure that the police were paid and the barriers were up, and then the park was cleaned and the electrician was turned off, and electric was turned off. And I went in at 7 and came out left at 11, and I thought, wait a minute, I'm 60. I went there at 55. I was there. I said, no, this is much too much for me at 55, no. And so I left, and then they called me back, and I became the executive director of something called Civic Call, which is no longer in service, that if you had a problem, you'd call me, and I would call whoever's obstructing the sidewalk, and I'd make sure they would get it out of the way, and then I'd call you back and say, it's done, and they'd say, thank you very much. And at that time, I also became I work for the media department. And the media department, of course, I felt all these angles, there's cameras, so I wanted to get the back of the thing and, these kind of director's angles, and I was told, no, you can't do that. And I was told to answer a phone. No, don't answer the phone. And I thought, this ain't what it is. It's working out. So I left that, and I worked for a marketing company at the beginning of the markets, the fresh markets. And we started out with 3 markets, and now we went up to 16 markets, carrying umbrella stands and tables and jars of honey and stuff. I said, well, I'm having a ball, but enough is enough. So I left that, and I became a part manager of 2 luxury high-rises, Morton Towers and Manhattan Towers, which was quite enjoyable because you get to know who's in your building. And you know that the lady upstairs used to work for the Japanese airline, although she was English, spoke Japanese. And the lady in the basement was Japanese and married to the Coast Guard captain. And so I said, hello, do you know? And we had Japanese dinners. She would invite people for Japanese dinners. And I love doing that. I'm a networker. I like to think I'm a networker. And are you asking me these questions, or I'm just rambling?
It's just fine. Whatever is happening is happening.
Well, okay. Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS is a combination of Broadway Cares and Equity Fights AIDS. That were 2 organizations that are raising money for clients, AIDS patients, and they pay their rent, their medicines, their doctor bills, their telephone bills. They don't give money directly to the client, but they pay all their bills so that they can. Broadway Cares was the technical side of which were coming up that I didn't know of. And Equity Fights AIDS, I did a tour. My last show was 42nd Street. And I had never been on a tour before, much less a bus and truck tour, which is, the lowest. I'm Broadway, bus and truck. And I called 6 people who I knew was on tours, and I said, should I do it? Should I? Yes, do it. I am so glad I did it. So glad. We became a family. And I was the entertainment director. And there were 65 people in the show. And we entertained ourselves Thanksgiving, Easter, 4th of July, Christmas, New Year's. I would put on a show. Anybody who wanted to do anything, you could be in the show. What do you want to do? Most people did their audition pieces, and there was a review. And because I knew, well, it's a long story. Are you ready for it?
Go.
When we get to San Francisco, they asked the star of the show.
Who was?
I don't remember his name, but he was a Las Vegas singer, sang beautifully, acted well, but always went to Vegas on the weekends on his day off because he was a star in those shows. Not the big ones, but I almost had his name. And they asked him to present the choreographer award for a company, an organization called the Gold Awards, the San Francisco Gold Awards, which was awards for nightclub singers, anyone who was entertaining in the hotels. And he said no. And they asked me. I was the oldest in the group. There were 65 of us, so I was the oldest, one of the oldest men. So they asked me to do it, and I said, of course, I would love to do it. So I got my tuxedo on, and I came to the place, and I gave the award. And I happened to say, I also was doing, in the 70s and thereabouts, all of those entertainers who entertained after the shows, in 88s, in Don't Tell Mama, in
piano bars.
Piano bars. And I used to do that. I had a piano bass drum trio that I loved. And we would do an 11 o'clock show. And I would do 2 clubs a week. And people would come to see me. And that's why they let me do it, because they would fill the place. 60 people maybe. And I because I was in the theater and knew the musicians, they would make arrangements for me, and it was the time that Medler was doing it. Lots of people were doing it, and so that what became Manhattan Cabaret Awards. And I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if the Gold Awards teamed up with the Manhattan Cabaret Awards, and we could have an exchange of talent? And anyone who was interested in doing that, please, I'm hanging around, just come up. Well, afterwards we had drinks, and then this man came up, who happened to be Ed Maglin, and said, I'm interested in doing that. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, well, I'm the president of the Gold Awards. And we became very good friends. And he was able to get us, well, the 42nd Street Company wanted to put on a show, and they asked the star, the Vegas star, to direct it and put it together. And what they saw that he was going for, they didn't like, because he wanted people to say there's no business like show business, singing with crutches and casts and arm, and people said, no, I don't want to do that show. And then he left. And then they turned to me and said, could you help us? And of course I'd love doing that kind of stuff. So I put together a review, and they all did their audition pieces. And it was because of Ed Maglin. We got the Morris Mechanic Theater free. We got the lighting and all the people free. Anyone who wanted to join in did. The wardrobe department were the ushers. It was just a happening. And because Ed knew the AIDS Emergency Fund and the Shanti Project and all that stuff, the house was full. And we raised $14,000, I think, for AIDS Emergency Fund and the Bill Kendall Memorial Fund, 2 locals. So, and then I was able to get the show in the Pride Parade. And there's nothing like being in a Pride Parade, because we had a big banner that said 42nd Street, advertisement for the show. But the love that comes from the side is amazing. They just love it. And they reach out to you. I've got goosebumps. It's extraordinary experience. And so I was able to get us there, and we had, it's leading up to it, don't worry. And we played a baseball game, and we all had baseball outfits on, and we sang um, from one show. There's a baseball song, and they filmed it. So that got a lot of response from the supervisors and also the papers and et cetera, et cetera. So when I finished 42nd, and we did that in every place that we went. Somebody sang a song, somebody did something for the local. So when we came back to New York City, and I closed 42nd Street, there was something in me that knew that something else needed to be done. And so the last performance of 42nd Street, I came off the stage, and I can remember saying to myself, that's the last of it. And Ed called and said, Michael, now that your 42nd Street is closed, why don't you come to San Francisco and do my AIDS work? And so he had an apartment complex that he owned. And so I'll give you an apartment. You can work at my marketing company and do my AIDS work. So that's how I eventually got to Shanti Project. And during that time, Ed said, why don't we go to New York and talk to the equity organization and present them with what we did? And so I still had my apartment there, and we stayed at the apartment, and we went, I knew people in the union, and I said, I'd like to propose something. And I wrote out in a typewriter, bad typing, that this is what we did, and I propose that the union can do it, and you can call it Unions Fighting AIDS, Equity Fights AIDS, Unions Together, whatever. And they said, well, that's a good idea, because they had just finished The Night of 1,000 Stars, and they were exhausted. And so they didn't know what to do. And here I come with an idea. And a week later, they sent me a letter saying, thank you very much, we'll take you up on it. And I eventually wanted to be the executive director of it, but I didn't want to move back to New York City, so I wasn't really that disappointed when they got Tom Viola, who knew and knows how to run an organization. And so it's basically based on the AIDS Emergency Fund, which gave money to pay the bills in San Francisco. So that's the basis of it. And the beauty of it is that everyone does something now to raise money through Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. The dancers do something in Fire Island. The hat people do something. The wardrobe people do something. It's just amazing. I talk to Tom all the time, and I say, Tom, it was a little seed of an idea. And look at how it's grown. I mean, now it's since 1998. It's raised millions of dollars and helped. People say to me, I said, I was the messenger. That's all I am. It's just I said, hey, let's put on a show. And they ran with it. And I say, that's all. They said, but Michael, think of the thousands of people that you have helped, or that it has helped. And in a funny way, we were always told, I'm going to start crying. We're always told to leave the world a better place than when we got here. And so I've done that. The world of AIDS, of homosexuals, of theater, I believe is a better place. From a seed, an idea. It's amazing. Life is just fucking amazing. And I'm so happy to be alive.
And you pulled those three worlds together with a seed. Entertainment, the AIDS crisis, and gay men.
And women.
And women.
And other people who I guess need it. I'm not sure who they give it to, but the kicker is that the AIDS Emergency Fund is one of their benefactors. So it's come full circle.
It's reminiscent, in a way, of the song from Oliver when Nancy sings "As Long as He Needs Me," and there's that line in there, "When someone needs you, you love them so." And that's how you felt about Danny. That's how you felt about your mother. And that's how you feel about your life.
It's all about love. That's the whole reason why we're here. Don't start tearing.
Never.
I mean, what else is there? There's greed. There's money. I'm reading John Lennon's book, The Lives of John Lennon. He's a mess. He was a mess. He spent thousands of money in one day. He just didn't know what to do. I mentioned when we first started, I believe that the Catholic Church is very responsible for lots of us who lived in the era when being gay was less worthy, going to hell, wrong. And what all of these things that I've told you makes me feel worthwhile, makes me feel normal, makes me feel needed, makes me feel human. I'm worthwhile, which so many of us, I never felt worthwhile even when I was on the stage. If I fucked up, oh, see, he's a faggot. Oh, see, he's a homo. So I never, ever fucked up. I was always right on the button, purposely. And it's only since I've been retired and had this experience with Eric Holmes and Center for Spiritual Living, it's all in your mind, how your perspective is in your mind. And I'm perfect just the way I am. You are too. We all are. And we're all here for a purpose. And the life, the adventure of life is to trying to find out what your purpose is, what your talent is.
What's yours?
To love.
And is that different for anybody else? Or is...
I guess it's in degrees. I mean, you know, I mentioned that I take care of a 84-year-old woman who's got onset dementia. People say, why do you do that, Michael? I mean, she's a friend. She's a human being. Could be me, it could be you. And it's all a learning process for what's coming next.
Does that have to do with, in some way, shape, or form, the fact that it took you so long to go see a friend in New York?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I will never, ever turn my back on someone who needs help. Never, ever. And I have got a circle of friends who are so supportive of me, emotionally and financially. Because being an actor, I haven't saved a golden egg. I've saved a copper egg. And they are so generous to me, towards me, and I'm so grateful. I don't know how long you're going to go here, but if I'd like to end it with, I mean, we can continue.
No, let's.
But retirement, as Joseph Campbell says, is entering the sphere of enjoyment and appreciation while relaxing in the wonder of it all. And I am living in the wonder of it all. look at that sky, look at those clouds. I look out on palm trees that are dancing in the wind. I'm just so fortunate.
And thank you very much. And we are fortunate that you shared
Goodness,
this with us.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm overwhelmed. Thank you.